Today on Engine Week, we visit Chris at Airworx in Bruton, Alabama. Okay everyone, so in this engine series, I've covered everything from brand new engines and even some of the used engines or auto conversion engines. And something I definitely don't want to leave out is the option for having an overhauled legacy engine like Lycoming, Continental, or Franklin. So I'm back here at Airworx today to talk with Chris, discuss that very option. Alright, so everyone, today I'm back with Chris here at Airworx in Bruton, Alabama, and he has, let's say, the luxury or the opportunity to work on several different brands under one roof here. So if you're going to come back, and he'd be the perfect person to talk about this. So Chris, what are some of the things that might be a little bit different from the legacy engines of Continental, Lycoming, or Franklin? I know you specialize in Franklin, but what, I guess first off, which one might be a little bit lighter weight?
Well, as far as weight to horsepower ratio, your Franklins are always going to be a little bit lighter. They're a full cast aluminum cylinder engine, only carry a sleeve, where your Continental cylinders probably weigh 10 to 12 pounds more than a Franklin cylinder does per cylinder.
Okay. Is that due to materials of aluminum versus magnesium?
Because they've got a big steel barrel installed in them.
Okay.
If you were to take a look at a Continental cylinder, which we have over here, we'll take a look at a little bit later, they've got a big steel cylinder that's screwed into basically a cylinder head. It's been a contentious place over several years because you have the cylinder heads and the bases have tried to separate from one another. There's been some ADs come out and a lot of problems with that. Actually, a lot of pictures floating around where the head is blown off of the barrel itself.
Okay. So as like a tier, Franklin might be the lightest weight, then?
That's correct. Franklin is the lightest weight. Lycoming and Continental, comparatively speaking, are about the same.
Okay. And what would be some of the horsepower ranges across all of them? Are they pretty similar, or? Well,
similar. You know, of course, everything's power is always built on compression, stroke, and bore. So each engine's a little bit.
Size matters.
Size matters
with engines too.
for sure. You know, the Franklins were pretty neat. They only did two bores across the board. They did a 4.5 inch bore and a 4.625 inch bore. So, you know, 4.5 and 4 5/8 bore, which is really kind of unique for Franklin. All the crankshafts are stroked at 3.5 inches. Connecting rods are essentially all the same. So Franklin over the years did a really good job of keeping everything the same, where you're not having ADs out there for all kind of engines. Franklin engines, I think the 150 engines had one AD on them, the 165s had one AD on them over the life of 70, 80 years old engines.
So let's talk about horsepower for a minute with the different options across the whole line. Just the whole broad aspect of the spectrum, and then also more focused on like the lighter sport stuff. So like for Franklin, Continental, and Lycoming, what is like the baby engine, and then what is the big block?
So Franklin essentially started at 65 horsepower, and you can go all the way up to a 235 horsepower helicopter engine.
Okay.
There are a few experimental engines. People have taken cases, cut cases down. We've got a customer in Florida that's got a little 2-cylinder Franklin. Don't really know what the horsepower is on it, but it's not much.
Right.
You know, Continental, they're down to 60, 65 horse, all the way up to 400 horse or so. Lycoming, you've even got some 8-cylinder Lycomings out there. So again, you know, you're
right.
down from the little small engines all the way up to the real big long engines.
Okay.
Of course, that's all based off of, you know, turbocharged, supercharged. There's all kind of different things that can affect that.
Now, in this shop, Chris mainly deals with certified engines, but you also get occasional experimental.
We do. We've got in here right now, we've got a little IO 360 that a guy had a prop strike on. We're going through that engine for him. I'm going to do some upgrades. He's going to get some ported and polished and flow match cylinders, as well as some higher compression pistons in that engine.
Okay.
Not going to be a whole overhaul. He didn't need a whole overhaul. It was a low hour engine, but decided that he wanted a little bit more up for the dollar, so we're going to oblige and fix him up.
Sure. Now, so that's a big spectrum, of course, of horsepower options that are available, whether you're certified or not. You know, I'm thinking more of the lower size engines because I'm thinking light sport and that kind of stuff. But obviously, people are building really big experimentals too, so they can handle 220 something horsepower as well. So don't negate that option. But right now, the light sport arena is very popular. So it would be more of the smaller horsepower engines you think that would be, because of their weight and costs. Like obviously the Continental 0200 has been very popular. What other options, like 235?
The problem with the 0200 Continental is finding crankshafts for them. We've had a few customers send in engines, and they've got really difficult to find serviceable crankshafts for.
Hey everyone, let me take just a moment here to thank our sponsors that make all of this possible. Great companies like Airworx, Airtech Coatings, Clemens Insurance Agency, ACME AERO, STOL Creek Aviation, NFLIGHTCAM, Whelen Aerospace Technologies. So take a moment after this video to say hello to all of them, and remember to check out the affiliate links in the description below. And remember, just build it. Let's get back to it. Okay. So you have to buy a new one versus an overhauled one, which drives the price up a little bit.
Correct. There comes a point, at some point when you're overhauling an engine, do the cost outweigh trying to replace some of the old parts? Do the cost outweigh just being able to buy a brand new crate engine? Okay. Lycoming, we're doing some 0320s, IO 360s. They're a great experimental engine based off of a type certificated engine.
Sure.
So that's a really good option for a lot of people.
Now, for you, labor-wise and as a remanufacturer, let's say, the cost really isn't any different for you. It's just paperwork.
That's
right?
all it is.
So something just to educate everybody, because some people have asked, like,
yes,
well, it's for experimental. Why isn't it cheaper? Why isn't it less expensive? The parts are the same.
Parts are the same. It takes the same labor. The clearances are exactly the same that we machine to. We don't just arbitrarily put our own dimension in there. We still machine to overhaul limits out of a type certificated manual.
Yeah.
So all the work is essentially the same. The only difference is you don't have the normal paperwork you would when you have a certificated engine. Which
means basically you might find a better deal on the core.
Correct.
Right? Like something that doesn't have a logbook.
That's correct.
As long as it meets specs, you can still remanufacture and overhaul it.
All day long.
Whereas a certified plane, if it's missing logbooks, then it becomes a little bit more of a situation.
Then you're working in a pretty gray area that you've got to figure out how to work within.
All right. So just to give people an idea of what it might cost, either or, experimental or certified, for overhauling, let's say, a popular 0200 or 235, if they send you in a core, which depends on what you get, a deal on a core, what would the overhaul cost, generally speaking, on one of those two engines?
Generally, an 0200, roughly around $16,000. 0320 Lycoming series, around $21,900. That's with new cylinders. If the cylinders can be overhauled, you save about $1,000. But again, you start looking into a cylinder. If you have to start putting a lot of parts in, there comes a point, the trade-off where you just buy a new superior cylinder.
Because you're replacing half the engine anyway.
Exactly.
You're buying new superior cylinders or wherever they come from.
Correct.
Right. All right. So one of the differences I want to point out about your shop, Chris, and to let everybody know about is, from what I understand, you do almost everything under one roof here.
That's correct. So you'll see a lot of engine shops that they claim to be engine shops, but they are assembly shops. There's a huge difference. We'll get asked all the time, why should we send our engine to you versus the other guy? We have the infinite ability here to take and custom machine all these parts for the truest, cleanest, most precise fit in-house, where Another shop are going to send their parts. They may send their crankcase out to Divco. They may send their cylinders out to Central Cylinder Service. They're going to send their crankshaft, camshaft lifters out to Aircraft Specialties. The good thing about us, we're able to bring all that under one roof, machine, control the quality of it, and then do the assembly after the fact, and then do the engine runs to make sure that we've done everything correct.
Got it. Okay. And I did another episode early on, which I'll link in the description below and a card somewhere, if you want to check out the complete walkthrough of Chris's shop that literally has every correct machine, the right machine for the right job, which was very impressive to me.
Yep. We invest a lot of money. We do a lot of internal engineering on certain processes on how to do things correctly. My background, I've done some engineering background. I grew up in race car engines, grew up in aviation, and we've just kind of culminated all of it together and made one good business out of it.
Got it. Now, going back to the experimental side of things for a minute, again, what would maybe you recommend for some of the smaller horsepower engines that might be either easier to get parts for, easier to work on, or easier to maintain and be cost effective? I know you're not a big fan of some of the alternative engines out there because you've been a certified guy and you're very versed in that. So tell me what your experience is with those smaller horsepower engines.
It's really what you want as an aircraft owner building your own plane. All the engines are great engines because they're based off a type certificated design. I wouldn't be able to say one is really any better than the other.
So just if you're in the Ford camp, you're the Ford camp, or the Chevy camp, or the Chevy camp.
That's
okay.
Right.
Which I've found this, and I'm sure you all have too, that it's almost like a religion or a sports team with these engines. Once you choose go team whatever,
absolutely,
everybody's passionate about that team they're on.
Something that I've been asked over the years, and people have this voodoo thing against Franklin, is I make sure they understand. Franklin and Lycoming were the only two engine manufacturers to ever delve into helicopter engines, recip helicopter engines.
Okay.
And those engines are running 3,100, 3,200 hours, or 3,200 RPM all the way up to TBO. So Continental kind of shied away from that. Not saying Continental couldn't have done it, but they just never did. So myself, I've got better than 2,000 hours flying behind Franklin engines, and most of them helicopter. All they're good engines.
You kind of specialize, and you do all the different brands, but you kind of specialize in the Franklins. So how did you get to that? Real short history, how did you get into that and decide to specialize in Franklin?
It all happened by accident.
Okay.
So I've been a helicopter pilot for many years. Had a Bell 47D1, had a Franklin engine in it. Felt it needed more power, so I went and overhauled the engine. I had a good friend of mine that had another Bell 47D1. He had a student over from somewhere overseas. They were out flying, he blew his engine. He had all of his yellow tag parts ready to go. He brought them to me on a weekend. I built him an engine over a weekend. He put it in his aircraft. He was able to finish the guy's instruction. Mm-hmm. Well, he had some contacts that I was unaware of, made some phone calls, and the next thing I know, we start doing Franklin cylinders and doing limited Franklin overhauls, and he is now one of the guys works with the FAA, a safety inspector. So really, really good guy, and he kind of put us on our way when it came to Franklin engines. Big difference on some of the crankshafts. Franklin was very unique in the way they did these. So a lot of your six-cylinder cranks, Continental in particular, Lycoming in particular, they have big old counterweight blades that hang off of them. They've got these counterweights that are rattling around in the crankshaft. Those counterweights are what absorb the harmonics to protect that engine. It's also a weak point. You have more material slinging around the inside of an engine, could potentially have a failure. Franklin was unique. They never used counterweights on the crankshaft. They basically balance the crankshaft. When we hang connecting rods and pistons, all of that is balanced within 1 gram. In the end, you get a very, very, very smooth engine out of the Franklin engines.
And it's just the crank itself is being balanced.
Just the crank and what we call the reciprocating assembly. So it'll be your crankshaft, connecting rods, pistons, piston pin plugs, and piston rings. You weigh all of that stuff so that all of your weights equal each other opposing is what you do.
And to take out any possible harmonics, there is a flywheel, correct?
You do have a dampener that goes on the end of the crankshaft, which is your starter flywheel, essentially.
One thing that I've seen in the forums here and there, and I say, you know, Chris does Franklin, the first thing out of everybody's mouth is say, well, can you still get parts for those? So Chris, can you answer that question?
We build 40 to 60 engines a year, and we haven't
40
ran out
to
of parts
60?
yet. Yeah, 40 to 60 a year.
Wow.
Still haven't ran out of parts for them. There's a lot of new PMA parts. There's a lot of PMAs in work right now. New bearings, piston rings are already PMA'd. There's new oil pump assemblies being made. New pistons being made. We're looking at new camshafts for the 220 horse engines, also looking at new crankshafts for the 150, 165s. So there's lots of things in work.
Okay. Is that all done here or overseas? Or
no, there's actually a company in Texas that's doing a lot of engineering on stuff right now to get the PMA approvals done.
Okay. Because I heard there's another company outside of across the pond that's doing stuff, but hard to communicate.
PZL, so PZL bought Franklin air-cooled motors way back in the day. They produce some Sport 4s and some small 4-cylinder engines, but never got back into producing certificated parts, it doesn't appear.
Okay.
So while they own the type certificate, they really aren't supporting the type certificate. So there are some things being done here in the States now to start being able to produce some new parts in order to keep these legacy engines flying.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Chris, thanks for giving us a quick overview of what's available on the legacy line of aircraft engines. And again, I don't want to discount the option for you builders out there to have somebody like Chris overhaul your engine or work with him on doing subcomponents of overhauling your engine even to get your kit or your project flying. And that, my fellow builders, is the finale of the Engine Week series for 2020. Thanks for following along the entire week through our Engine Week series. Be sure to like and consider subscribing. Be on the lookout for another video where I reveal the engine I'll be using in my project. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.